So, my name is Steingrímur Jónsson, as Thorsteinn said, and I'm a professor at the University of Akureyri, and I also work as a scientist at the Marine Research Institute here. Now, here in the background is a picture which is not from the Arctic Ocean, but it is taken from Bjarni Sæmundsson, the research vessel of the Marine Research Institute, and you can see the sea ice in the background, and this is from the coast of Greenland, which is not so far away from Iceland. And the sea over there is really what comes out of the Arctic Ocean. So in many senses we can say that the Arctic Ocean is just at our doorsteps here. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the Norwegian-Icelandic cooperation in Arctic and subarctic seas, and maybe not all of you know what area I'm talking about. So the Marine Working Group of IASC which IASC is the International Council for the International Arctic Science Council, I think is right. So they have defined the geographic scope of the Marine Working Group to be the Arctic Ocean and the subarctic seas. And the subarctic seas, there are both Pacific and Atlantic subarctic seas, and I think the most relevant area for Norwegian-Icelandic cooperation is probably the Atlantic subarctic seas. And we have very many common interests, as some people have pointed out. We have many fish stocks, which are common, and we have climate that is partly common, and there is shipping, oil, etc., all happening or changing rather rapidly in the Arctic in these days. Well, we have also some potential conflicts, but I will not mention any of them here. I think that's for other people to solve. But I think there are ample opportunities for cooperation between Norway and Iceland in this field. Now, Nordic oceanographers were really pioneers in oceanography, not just in this area, but worldwide, and presenting or developing also the theories of oceanography. And many of these pioneers were actually Norwegians, and we have heard mentioned some of them. So I will mention two more. And that was the first one to really map the subarctic seas in the Atlantic sector was Henrik Mohn, who went on an expedition, I think in 1876, and he gathered data from this area, and this is what we call the subarctic seas today, except for the North Sea. And then we had Helland Hansen and Nansen, who wrote a thesis on what they called the Norwegian Sea, and it was actually all the sea you see here with arrows. But nowadays this is not all called the Norwegian Sea. We have the Iceland Sea, and we also have the Greenland Sea up here. But the Norwegians mostly studied this area, while the Danish people like Captain Irminger was studying more the sea south of Iceland, and what we call the Greenland Sea in Iceland, which is between Iceland and Greenland, but everyone else calls it the Irminger Sea by this Captain Irminger. But real Icelandic-Norwegian cooperation didn't begin until a little bit later, maybe before the World War II, and it was based on the herring stock Actually, it was an Icelander who figured out that, or hypothesized that the herring they were fishing here in great quantities north of Iceland, that it was actually coming from Norway, where it had its spawning grounds. So this is a common fish stock, one of them. And I am not going to talk here about the fisheries research, in which Norway and Iceland, of course, cooperate extensively. But I will only talk about what we call physical oceanographic research. But there is plenty to talk about that. So we have had, and I will mention now some recent cooperation work between Norway and Iceland. And as you know, maybe we are, or some people in Iceland are hoping to find some oil between Iceland and Jan Mayen in the so-called Dreki area. And we did some survey there in 2007 to 2008. So we put out one current meter mooring that did some sections of salinity and temperature in the area. And at the same time, the Norwegians were studying on this ridge. This is Jan Mayen here, so this is the Jan Mayen ridge. And they put out 2 moorings here with current meters. And then they measured the temperature and salinity on these sections. And they were mainly interested in the herring stock, or the biology, not so much the oil business. But we combined later these data together, and we are still working on publishing this research. And in Akureyri, to further study this area, we have now gone into cooperation with the Marine, or Institute of Marine Research in Bergen. And they actually came here on this ship here, the Johan Hjort, this spring in June. And they put out 2 current meter moorings here in the East Icelandic Current. Now the East Icelandic Current is very important for the herring fishery, because it keeps the herring away from Iceland if it is too strong. But if it is weak, the herring can escape into the North Icelandic waters, which it hasn't really done so far after the stock recovered from the overfishing. So these are the people I am working with on this, and this is the Marine Research Institute here that is working on this together with the Norwegians. And we have had cruises on our ship, the Árni Friðriksson, and we put out 1 mooring here, and we do some CTD work, or salinity and temperature measurements. And we also have put out some surface drifters. This is something you just throw into the sea and let it drift with a sail at some certain depth, usually 15 meters. And then you have a center here that tells you where it is at each moment, so you can follow the track of the drifters, and you can see they are going along the Iceland-Faroe Ridge and over to Norway. But some of them, if they are deployed east of or west of the Kolbeinsey Ridge, they tend to drift towards the west. So that's interesting. So this is very new. This is just happening today. A few years ago, a new ocean current was discovered off Iceland, and well, it was somewhat hard to get people to believe that you could find such a big thing in the ocean in the 20th century. So, but one person was very interested in this current, and he believed it was a reality. It was this guy here, who is an American from the WHOI Oceanographic Institution, which is probably the most famous oceanographic institution in the world. And he actually happened to have a Norwegian PhD student who is now a professor at the University of Bergen. So we have had several cruises with him to explore this new current. And in 2011, he came on this research vessel, the Knorr, together with his assistant, and we put out a lot of moorings over here. And then a year later, we recovered the mooring with the icebreaker James Clark Ross, and this is a multinational cooperation. This is the United States, Iceland, Norway, and Netherlands. So we had very many moorings. I think there were 14 in total over the Denmark Strait. So this was only picked up now in August, last August. So we have a lot of work to do to process this, and I don't think there has ever been so many instruments in the water at any one time in these waters. So this is a very large project, and this is just from a picture from from James Clark Ross. You can see some of the instrumentations there. But this is what we did also in 2011 on the Knorr. And here you can see how we have been able to trace this current. That's the light blue here. That's where we have found this new current. So it is carrying deep water to the Denmark Strait and then into the North Atlantic Ocean. And this is what we did on the icebreaker, the James Clark Ross. So then we went up along the coast of Greenland, where there usually is some ice, even though this was in summer. And then we were tracing there are two sources of this deep water, this new current and one coming along the East Greenland continental shelf or slope. So in this case we were investigating where the other source is coming from. I just came on last Friday I came from a kickoff meeting in an EU project which is called NACLIM, which is, you cannot see the map, but Norway is involved in this. So we have 18 partners in this project, and we got 8.6 million euros. That's about 1.5 billion Icelandic kroner, and about 65 million Norwegian kroner. So it's a lot of money, but of course it's spent between a lot of partners. And this is a 4-year project that will last until January 2017. And the research focus is to try to make better assessments of decadal climate forecasts. So we are trying to forecast the weather or climate for the next decade, or maybe 2 or 3 decades. But if it's successful, we will see in 2017. So we have a lot of work to do. And part of this mooring line I showed you before is now a part of NACLIM. And we will cooperate with the Norwegians on research or investigating the East Greenland current within that program. Well, last month I came home from the last meeting of the last European project we had, which was called THOR, and it ends actually now next month. And then NACLIM is really a continuation of this project. So we will be doing similar things. And this project had 20 partners and 9 million euros. And our task in this project was to measure the fluxes across the ridge from Greenland to Scotland. And this will continue also in NACLIM. So we have current meter moorings on all these green sections here, and we are measuring the fluxes of water and heat into the Nordic seas. and also the outflowing fluxes. You don't see the sections, but we have current meters here also, and also in these flows here along the Faroe and on the Iceland-Faroe Ridge. So these are the newest numbers in Sverdrups. Sverdrup was, of course, a Norwegian, and in his honors we always measure oceanic flows in Sverdrups, and one Sverdrups is 1 million cubic meters per second, which is a lot of water. And these are the people that we are working with on this. So Svein Österhus, who is from the University of Bergen, and this is my colleague at the Marine Research Institute here in Valdimarsson. That's me, and that's Kjetil Våge, who is at the University of Bergen. So we have a long tradition of cooperating with Norwegian institutions, both universities and research institutions. Now, one thing about this oceanographic research is that it requires a lot of logistics. It is something you have to plan very long time ahead, and it requires ship time, and it requires also very expensive instrumentation. If you're going to use the instrument in the sea, it usually costs maybe 10 times what it costs to use it on land. And it's very resource demanding. So how do we do this? You know, I think, how do we do this cooperation? And I think education is a primary importance. So I am very happy to see that within this memorandum of understanding that was discussed here before, we have a possibility of exchanging students both from Iceland to Norway and from Norway to Iceland. And I think we should aim for more collaboration for students at the MSc and PhD level. I think that's very important for future research. I can take myself as an example. I studied in Norway at the University of Bergen, and I created some contacts there, which are still very valuable. It is the same people that you saw the pictures of here. So I think that's a very valuable experience, and that's something we should support. But there are also other possibilities like Nordplus and Erasmus. And that's what I think we should emphasize more, to get students going from one country to another and make it more easy. Now, how do we finance these things? Well, I have said something about it. We have the EU, which both Norway and Iceland can apply for research money. And that's really where the large money is sitting. And we have the Nordisk Ministerråd, Norwegian Council of Ministers, which also give out money, and particularly for networking, which is very valuable. We have the Arctic Council. I don't know how much money they spend on research, but they do a lot of work. And we have ICES, which is the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. But the funding for our research work has mainly come from the EU, and then from institutional money that the Marine Research Institute supports us, and the IMR in Norway support them, and the Icelandic Center for Research and the Norwegian Research Council. So we have had a lot of common Arctic research programs, and I am not very worried about the future for Norwegian Icelandic cooperation, at least not in this field. But I think it's important to create opportunities for researchers from both of these countries to meet and discuss. So that's all. Thank you very much. So this is from the James Clark Ross with Greenland in the background. So nice weather, but we had a lot of mist, fog, so maybe appropriate for the title of the conference.
So can I follow you?
Yeah.
So thank you, Steingrímur, for an informative and encouraging presentation. Now it's open for questions.
Yes, Steingrímur, thank you. I would just like you to comment a little bit more in detail on the deep sea current you discovered there. I suppose it is a cold current, since it is a deep water current, and takes its source northeast of Iceland, is it? Have you any information on what triggers this current?
Well, I don't know what triggers it, but we actually wrote a paper in 2011 where we tried to explain a possible mechanism, which I'm not convinced that it is the right mechanism, but it involves water mass transformations along with the Atlantic water flowing along the continental shelf of Iceland that is gradually cooled and sinks to this level, which is about 600 meters depth, and then it flows out. But it's really, I think, the reason why people didn't discover this before was that it's not supposed to be that way. Most oceanographers that would go there and measure the temperature and salinity and density, they would say, you are stupid. You know, the current, it must be going the other way. And that's what people thought. It was not until we had current meters that we could see that it was going the wrong way. And now this, and many people didn't believe this when it was first published. So, but now I think most people believe this. So, but we don't know what is driving it really, and I'm not, you know, I am not.
Another question.
Yeah.
This is a deep, cold current.
This is a deep, cold current.
Is it warmer and considerably warmer than the Greenland?
East Greenland.
East Greenland cold currents that come from the extreme north.
No, it's not so cold. It is not as cold. It's about minus 0.5 degrees.
How much?
Minus 0.5. While the East Greenland current can be minus 1 point, or at the freezing point. So this is not as cold, but it's still very cold. So, but it is more saline. It has more salinity than the East Greenland current. So it's heavier, and therefore it sinks to great depths because of the salinity. So, but I know we have a lot of light blue here, but I am still not very convinced that it is, a lot of it is coming from east of the Kolbeinsey Ridge. But that's, you know, that's an open question. We can discuss that, but maybe you are not the right people to discuss it.
Yeah, Anna?
Yeah, I had a question.
Wait. So people.
I had a very simple question. Is your group participating in the attempt to internationally coordinate all of these observations about the Arctic? I believe IASC, the International Study of Arctic Change, is one of the groups that's working on this, because this is something that, at least at the National Science Foundation in the U.S., that we've been trying to work with Europe on how, so we're not duplicating our efforts and observations, and it seems to be not as easy as one would think. to coordinate. So I was just curious if you were part, because obviously your moorings are very important to that effort.
Well, I don't know about ISAC, but we had a cooperation with something called ASOV, Arctic Subarctic Ocean Fluxes, and I think they are maybe reporting to ISAC.
Yeah.
So these moorings were all part of, or sort of under the umbrella of ASOV. So I think everybody who wants to know or should know, they know about this. So I think there is international cooperation, and we were measuring here between Greenland and Scotland, and there were other people measuring in the Canadian archipelago, and there is a group measuring in the Bering Strait, and there are people measuring in the Fram Strait as well. So, and we know about each other. So, but I don't think there is any sort of place where you can go and see where all of the moorings in this area are placed.
Do you think there should be?
Yeah, I think that would be a help. And
how would we go about doing that?
yeah, I think you have, you know, for example, IASC,
Yeah.
which is, I think ISAC is sort of under IASC. So it's very complicated with all these abbreviations, but but I think maybe, and then we have SEON, you know, they have talked about doing this. SEON is, what is it called? Sustained Arctic Observation Network. So there is a lot of institutions, and of course we have also databases. For example, the National Oceanographic database in the US.
Yeah.
So, and they should know about this, and they should get the data. But data in oceanography and all other natural sciences is a complicated matter. So there are a lot of databases, and they do not always cooperate. But I think that would be a good thing to aim for, to have it in one place.